This is the morning brief from the Economic Times.
Please check your seatbelts and your seatbacks in upright position before takeoff. Thank you.
Once the leading full-service airline in India and a household name, Jet Airways at its peak was operating close to 1,000 flights a day across the globe. But in April 2019, the airline's operations ground to a halt when its promoter, Naresh Goyal, failed to raise fresh funds for the loss-making airline, which owed 8,000 crore rupees to banks alone. From being India's market leader and a premier brand, Jet Airways became the first domestic airline to go through bankruptcy proceedings. The developments back then came as a shock to many, except perhaps the experts who track the sector and who you will hear from in today's episode. But now, after 2 years, it looks like there's a chance that Jet might return to the skies.
Will Jet Airways get wings to fly once again? Belatedly, there is fresh hope. A resolution plan submitted by a consortium of London-based Calrock Capital and a UAE-based businessman, Murari Lal Jalan, has been approved.
Now there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. While lenders have cleared the plan, it still requires multiple approvals and government support.
It's like Jet Airways is back in the air because the NCLT has approved the Calrock Jalan Consortium Resolution Panel.
Yet, even with this approval, charting a new flight path for Jet is not going to be easy, particularly with the pandemic's lasting effects on global travel. So the question remains, will Jet Airways actually fly again? Join me, Indulekha Aravind, on this episode of the Morning Brief from the Economic Times, where we decode this and Jet Airways' new owners' plans. To take us through Jet's plans and what its new owners might have in mind, we have with us today Shukor Yusof, who heads aviation consultancy Endau Analytics, who's joining us from Malaysia. We also have ET Prime's aviation editor Tarun Shukla and ET's Anirban Chowdhury, both of whom have been tracking the Jet saga very closely and have broken several stories on it. Thank you, Shukor, Tarun, and Anirban for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much.
Anirban, let me start with you. Last week, the National Company Law Tribunal, or NCLT, approved the new owner's plan to revive Jet. What do we know so far about this plan, including the kind of investments that might come in?
So the resolution plan, as we see it, like most resolution plans, is divided into two parts. First is about paying off Jet's creditors, and the other part is getting Jet to fly again. So like all resolution plans of bankrupt companies, we can say that almost every creditor is taking a massive haircut. So all of them are getting between 9% to 14% of the money that they had actually claimed. So to give you a few instances, the financial creditors are getting about rupees 1,010 crore against a claim of 7,454 crore. The workmen and employees are getting just about rupees 113 crore, whereas they had asked for rupees 1,200 crore. Other operation creditors like vendors, etc., are getting 9 crore as against a huge claim of 6,658 crore.
Wow.
So all the creditors have taken a massive haircut, but that's what they'll have to do with. As far as Jet's revival plan is concerned, neither Mr. Jalan nor somebody from Calrock has given a very clear idea of where they're going, which is just as well because I think the plan will be formed now as they go and as they seek approvals. What Mr. Jalan told us in an interview a few months back is that he plans for Jet to have 25 new planes by the end of the first year of operations, whenever that happens. In the plan that is submitted to the bankruptcy court, that's NCLT, they said that they plan Jet to have 120 planes in the first 5 years of its operations, which is the number of planes that Jet had in its fleet at its peak. The consortium has also said that there will be a ratio of 114 employees per aircraft. So both these numbers to me are very ambitious, and they're slightly illogical also, because that's a very inflated workforce that they're looking at. Because 114 employees to one aircraft would mean about 14,000 employees, which is quite big in this low margin competitive environment. So Jet used to have 3,300 employees on its rolls when it was operating at its peak. After it shut down and after the court appointed a resolution professional to oversee the resolution proceedings, only 200 of them were made part of a team called the asset preservation team. That is to take care of the aircraft, the maintenance, the machinery, all of that. Because remember, when Jet shut down, and even now, it has 11 aircraft on its fleet in whatever condition they're in. According to the plan, the consortium plans to take just 50 of those 200 people. And apart from that, it has this pretty impractical and impracticable plan of shifting more than 3,000 employees to a subsidiary which will provide ground handling services. So you will have engineers and technicians, etc., all becoming part of a unit that is supposed to provide ground services at airports, which is quite impractical, and I don't know how that will happen. And this unit will also have a minuscule shareholding of Jet.
Some of what you said, especially about the employees, does sound rather puzzling. Are those some of the reasons why you recently wrote that, despite the bankruptcy court's approval coming through, it could easily take, at least another year for Jet to actually start flying?
Yes, of course. That is one, and there are other reasons as well. One thing that we can be clear of is that Jet won't have to go through the route of a startup airline, which would require a fresh license, which would take more than a year. It would probably take a year and a half. What Jet will have to do in its new avatar, let's call it Jet 2.0, it'll have to get the license reactivated. So for that, there's a lot of paperwork. It'll have to present training manuals, operation manuals to the DGCA. It'll have to make a team. It'll have to have a fleet of at least 5 aircraft, which is the prerequisite for an airline to start operations. It'll have to have the prerequisite crew. That will have to be done simultaneously, of course. So, it has to talk to lessors and aircraft manufacturers, both of which is happening right now. I think from what we hear, Jet is talking to both Airbus and Boeing, because Mr. Jalan has said that, he plans for Jet to have brand new aircraft. Another issue is that while NCLT has approved the resolution plan, there are still about 40 pending cases against Jet at the NCLT, some of which have been quashed. But there is no saying that, for example, the employees union, which had a case against Jet, they wanted to look at the resolution plan before it was approved. That was quashed by the court. There is no saying that they won't appeal again. So if that happens, there will be another, long line of cases and hearings, etc. So all of that will definitely take a year.
That all of what you just described definitely sounds time consuming. And of course, the DGCA that you mentioned is the aviation regulator for the sector.
The last 1 year, due to the COVID situations, a lot of slots are empty. This is number one. It has not yet been fulfilled. Secondly, we must understand some airlines have come, some airlines have gone. Even the Jet have gone down with the 140 aircraft. So that 140 aircraft had not been replaced. Apart from that, the capacity also increased in India. All the slots, if you will see in the airports, we are talking about the slots only for the 2 airports. The rest, all airports have more than enough slots available. We are talking Mumbai and Delhi. Okay. So in Mumbai and Delhi also the capacity is increasing.
We just heard Mr. Jalan in a February interview speaking about a lot of slots at airports being empty. Tarun, let me bring you in here. You've written extensively about the Jet resolution, and one of the contentious parts of the plan is the slots at airports that Jet used to have. Could you tell us why getting the right slots at airports are so crucial for an airline, and how the decision that Jet will have to apply for new slots could affect its revival?
Depending on what business model Jet Airways chooses, it will be critical what slot they get. If they get like a 11 o'clock slot from Delhi or Bombay, the business class passenger will not come for the 11 o'clock slot. He needs a 8 o'clock slot, 7 o'clock slot, 9 o'clock slots like Air India has, by the hour kind of flights. So that's going to be a big issue. And why is it so critical that you have a morning slot is also because it will hit on your revenues per flight. peak hour slot gives you, Jet used to get that from my conversations with some of the people there, about 15% more revenue on those flights. The slots itself are also under the government. And what we have seen is that the existing airlines have already been given the slots which Jet Airways used to fly. For example, the Bombay and Delhi slots, if I remember correctly, about 40% of the slots went to SpiceJet, 30% to Indigo, and Go Air and Vistara and so on and so forth. Now, initially, the stand of Mr. Jalan and the consortium was that they are very keen to get all the rights back, both the slots and the international flying rights and so on. What we are seeing now is clearly that they have now had, I understand from people who are aware of the subject, that they've had meetings with the ministry officials and the regulatory officials. And I think they seems to have arrived at a conclusion that even as they start off, they don't need all the slots. So we are going to see a lot of back and forth as far as slots are concerned. And the way slots are allotted is that if you do not use the slot for 3 consecutive seasons, and the seasons would be summer season, winter season, and so on and so forth, as the schedule is approved by the government for flights, the slots, go back and they can be distributed to somebody else, some other airline which is bringing in the aircraft. Now, one of the avenues for Mr. Jalan is to go to the government and say, the number of flights right now is not 100%. So give me some of those slots. The existing airlines will not be very keen to give those slots because they would have not completed 3 seasons as yet of not flying those slots. So it's going to be a lot of lobbying and tussle that we are going to see over the next few months for Jet Airways slots.
Rajesh Prasad, the Chief Strategy Officer of Jet Airways, recently said very confidently that Jet 2.0 will have an advantage when it comes to costs.
If you take any other airline, and what you said is that with slots established and rights established, all those would definitely be there. But in terms of the cost element, Jet 2.0 stands in a very enviable position because you don't have any legacy liabilities.
Shukor, you've been tracking the Jet saga. The crisis for the full-service airline was an opportunity for its Indian rivals in terms of market share, getting slots, etc. How difficult is it going to be for Jet to claw back what it's lost and, more importantly, to start making money?
Hi, Indulekha. Thanks very much for inviting me. To answer your question, I think anything can be done. Money, if you're willing to part with money, right? Now, under the current situation in this COVID pandemic, it is, I would say, a lot easier to do things because the cost of doing business, the cost of acquiring aircraft, the cost of acquiring people is a lot less than pre-COVID. One, because people are out of job. Number two, the leasing companies are very happy to lease out aircraft, particularly the ones that Jet would be eyeing, which are the wide-body aircraft. And because nobody wants to take this at the moment, international flights are pretty much non-existent today. Most of them are grounded. And so they would require a huge leap of faith from Murali Jalan and his partner, Florian Frisch, who is part of CalRock Capital in London. So it's ultimately, I understand from some of my contacts in the industry that they've actually reacquired some of the aircraft, the Boeing 777-300ERs that Jet possessed before, and they've actually paid. I cannot verify this, but these are just reports I'm hearing in the marketplace. So to the tune of about 13, 14 million US. Now, if he can do that, then that's a good sign because it means he's ready to put money where his mouth is. There are attractions to Jet, obviously, because of the slots which both Tarun and Anirban alluded to earlier. But again, I don't know to what extent they are able to get them. My understanding is that the government has given them away. They're unlikely to get them back. And if so, if they need to fly back to London or other airports, then it's going to cost them a lot of money. Slots are by definition very, very expensive. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's how much money they're willing to splash on this adventure. Again, I take what Anirban had said earlier about the unlikelihood of, the ratio of workers to aircraft. A lot of the numbers, some of the numbers, to me, it doesn't add up. Right? So I find it a bit unusual, some of the numbers being played out here. But and again, my concern is that Jet would pretty much be focused on international routes, and that's where you're going to make the most money.
I like that you use the term, how much money they plan to splash, because I want to mention here that the Virgin founder Richard Branson, of course, had famously said, if you want to be a millionaire, start with $1 billion and launch a new airline.
Yeah, you have to be utterly foolish to do something like that, or know something in the market that others don't.
Yeah, but as journalists, it's our job, of course, to be skeptical. Tarun, there's a lot of curiosity about the new owners of Jet, especially Mr. Murari-Lal Jalan, who seems to be a man in a hurry, and Caldor Capital. Could you tell us about both these key players?
Right. So, if you, I think Shukor used the word adventure. So I think even the characters who have come out of this, it's like, it's like some sort of a fantasy world, because we never knew about Mr. Jalan or Caldor Capital as far as aviation business was concerned, right? So I think there were lots of digging around which happened, and there was a lot of speculation saying that he is actually a front from Mr. Naresh Goyal. And obviously, these are all speculation. The reason for that speculation to some extent came from the fact that Mr. Jalan is actually, while not being in the aviation business and very low profile otherwise, is related to the Gupta family. This is a famous Gupta family from Saharanpur who migrated to South Africa, and they were very close to Jacob Zuma, who's just been imprisoned for 15 months. And they were sort of, I think there were a lot of corruption allegations and things like that.
Who are the Guptas? Well, they're three brothers, Ajay, Atul and Rajesh. They were born and grew up in northern India in this tiny city of Saharanpur. It was with Jacob Zuma that the family, hit upon a really mutually enriching relationship. And the two families, the Guptas and the Zumas, they started to get so entwined in their business interests that the South Africans actually took to calling them the Zuptas, the Zumas and the Guptas. By the end, they were so enmeshed in the system that they came to toxics. Banks couldn't handle them, auditors got burnt by them, and even a public relations firm went into bankruptcy because of their association with this family. So
they are related in terms of family with the Gupta family. And Mr. Naresh Goyal obviously is very close to the Gupta family. I mean, when there was a wedding there was a special Jet Airways plane which landed it in one of the airfields, which was, I think, the military airfield. It was not supposed to land in South Africa. And so there was a lot of controversy there. So, these are the links which are seen. But from what I have spoken with people, even if there are there's some truth to it. You cannot prove it unless there is some sort of an intergovernmental probe or something on those lines. Because the law says, as far as the NCLT goes, it says that unless you can prove that Mr. Goyal has provided some money and there's some transaction which can be shown to Mr. Jalan, till that time you cannot sort of disqualify him and so on and so forth. So that's one part of it. If you look at Mr. Jalan, even the website, I mean, we investigated him a little bit, and so even the website of Mr. Jalan MJ Developers, if I'm not wrong, it came up only in October 2019, and the bid for Jet Airways was made a few months later in June 2020. And suddenly after that also, you've seen a sudden push. He's gone on Twitter. He's given several interviews. And so there was a sudden push for publicity to establish himself as somebody who was really keen, to launch Jet Airways, and he means business and so on and so forth. So it's going to be very interesting how this plays out. people are also very keen to know who are the people he hires. For example, there's always speculation that you are going to see a lot of ex-Jet Airways people who were close to Mr. Goyal come and, into the new Jet Airways 2.0. So we'll have to see all that. But, this is all speculation. We cannot really, unless there is some sort of an intergovernmental probe, we cannot prove one way or the other whether there are any links or so on and so forth. But what is quite clear is that Mr. Jalan gets an absolutely new airline when it comes to the balance sheet. I think they have a very good advantage of over the other airlines now, like SpiceJet and even Indigo and Vistara and so on. He gets a great brand, so he can use that to really, sort of make a great airline, although the debts have been cleared. It can also be a great competition to Indigo, which is now like 50% of the market, while the rest of the airlines are like something around 10, 7, 6% kind of fragmented kind of a market. So he has a great opportunity as long as he plays depending on the market conditions and there are no other regulatory issues or governmental issues. I mean, he has a great chance to sort of, resurrect the airline once again.
Sure, but just to, clarify, neither Mr. Jalan nor Kalra Capital have had any previous investments or associations with the aviation business, right?
No, not to my knowledge. That was from whatever the research I have made. I have not seen any real sort of, connections to aviation. I think, and as far as even the links are concerned, both of them said that, in a written statement to me, he had said that specifically, I asked him whether he has met Mr. Goyal ever. He said no. Then I asked him whether he has met any of the Mr. Goyal's family members. Then he said he has not met anybody. So, and though he's based, he's based out of Dubai, where Mr. Naresh Goyal also used to sort of stay and has very close links with UAE, including the Etihad investment, which he saw in Jet Airways. But to our knowledge, I don't think so. We have any aviation connect with as far as Mr. Jalan is concerned. So, yeah.
Interesting. Anirban, Mr. Naresh Goyal was, of course, famous for his proximity to the powers of the day and leveraging that to his advantage, particularly to keep his rivals in check. So in the current landscape, do you see Jet's rivals going all out to return that favor in some sense?
Yeah, it's interesting what you say because, many of Jet's detractors and even employees have said that what happened to Jet was actually karma. When Jet stopped operations on 17th of April 2019, it was amazing how the airline was dismantled operationally, and parts of it went to its rivals. So as Tarun mentioned, most of the key slots went to its rivals, as they should, because they were not being used by Jet. But it was also amazing how Jet's aircraft went to some of its rivals. Some of them went to SpiceJet. I think some of them went to Vistara as well, very rapidly. According to the rules, I think it should ideally take much more time for an aircraft to be deregistered and be registered in some other airline's name, but it was done fairly rapidly. So yes, there is a strong lobbying of the incumbents. Now that Jet is not there, the others, they lobby quite a bit against newcomers. The industry isn't very kind to newcomers. The proof of that is in the fact that there have not been many new airlines that have survived in the last 10 years. The only exceptions being AirAsia and Vistara, which are promoted by the Tata Group, which may be one of the reasons why they've survived. But it's not like they haven't had their share of problems. So if Jet becomes an airline worth its name, if I may say so, it may face lobbying. And there are ample opportunities for Jet to grow to grow back to its old glory. As Tarun said, it's starting on a clean slate, it's getting a clean balance sheet, it's getting a great brand, which people still remember. But in order to face that lobbying, I think before facing any lobbying, Jet has to prove itself as an airline which is worth lobbying against. So it needs to, expand and be an aggressive competitor to some very powerful airlines, especially Indigo, for the airlines to take notice and probably lobby against it.
I like that. So first, Jet has to prove that it's a formidable rival before the others kind of take note and decide to do something about it. Before I go to Shukor for the final question, Tarun, I want to come to you. You'd written, and I quote, "Reviving a dead airline is like giving wings to an elephant and expecting it to fly." I love that quote. So what do you make of Jet's chances finally?
No, it's going to be, I think, very difficult for sure. There is no doubt about that. And nobody's going to make their life easy. But I think we have to look at it from this perspective, right? Last October, when the resolution plan was filed in the NCLT by Mr. Jalan, there was a series of postponements of the hearings. So there was a sudden feeling that nothing is going to go through. Everybody was dismissing it. And then from February onwards, we see there was suddenly, the hearings were happening very quickly. And, it was something obviously happened. We don't know what happened. But the other airlines, which were very dismissive, even the government and regulatory officials who I spoke with, they suddenly realized that maybe suddenly there is a chance that Jet can fly. An airline going through NCLTs for the first time. So, they still have doubts whether it will go through because there will be a lot of cases going forward as well. Then the next step will be, filing to the aviation ministry, which will then write to the home ministry for board positions and things like that, which need security clearance from the home ministry. And I think some of these people, if they are foreign nationals, they would be like, it can take 3 months. Then you go to the next level, which is the filing for slots and things like that. And we should not forget that the other reason it may not be very easy is because a lot of money will be needed, right? At every step, Jet will face some issue or the other. And I think the story, I assume it's the same story. It's almost like coming back what Jet did to others in terms of lobbying really hard. And it was like the numero uno in the Indian skies for so many years. Now the others are, in the same space, and they can really put a hard fight both in terms of money and in terms of, I suspect, clout as well.
Interesting days ahead for sure. Shukor, a final word to you, sitting in your vantage point from Malaysia. Aviation is currently going through one of its biggest crises because of the pandemic. Could you help us understand, what that crisis has been like for Asian airlines in brief, and how that's going to affect Jet's revival?
So the pandemic has wrought incredible damage to many carriers in this part of the world. And that structural damage may not recover at all. And I think in spite of the amount of money, in spite of the investments that have been put in, I think some of it would be irreparable already, because many of these carriers were sick before COVID even arrived. And now COVID has only exacerbated the problems, the issues that they were facing before, financial issues, mismanagement, and many others, over capacity, which is very, very obvious in Southeast Asia. So there is a difference when you look at different parts of the world. In North America, we're seeing a very quick recovery. United just ordered a huge number, I think over 70 aircraft, both Boeing and Airbus announced yesterday. And that's a sign of confidence, or perhaps even overconfidence, I should say. In Europe, again, Ryanair, EasyJet, the low-cost carriers are driving business. But here in Southeast Asia, and again, also in the subcontinent, things are very fluid. If you take China out of the equation, again, our part of the world is still the most vibrant, the most important aviation factor for all the aircraft manufacturers. And that's not going to change post-COVID, because the demand is there, the hunger and the economics are there. So I think when we look at everything in totality, I think, yes, aviation will definitely recover, but at what point, to what extent, and how quickly it can recover. I certainly don't think it will recover anytime soon. I think, many of us here in Southeast Asia, especially in Singapore and Malaysia, we think the recovery for this part of the world will probably be happening only beyond 2025, for example, which is 4 years from now. And that's also contingent on COVID not coming back in different mutants and different strains and all that. But when I see somebody like Murari coming in and looking at this, you can't help but feel excited, and perhaps it would be good for the industry. We don't know much about Mr. Murari or his partner Florian Fritsch, a German investor who's into renewable energy, into AI and all that stuff. But the thing is, if they can come up with the money, I think that there is certainly business to do. But whether or not the business makes sense, their business strategy, the business model, that's an entirely different thing. And that's for the regulators in India to decide whether they should be allowed to come in and do what they want to do, because aviation is a very highly regulated business, and it's also very price sensitive, especially in India. And if they think they can come in and go head on against Vistara, who's very much established now, or against Indigo, where management, in my view, is one of the best, not just in India, but for the rest of the world, then I think they've got their work cut out for them. Money alone doesn't take you very far in this business. You need the right people, as our panelists have said. If they can get people from ex-Jet to come in, and those are very, very strong people with very good experience. But again, I mean, then you have all these legacy issues that are linked to those people. But I think that's part and parcel of the aviation industry. But generally, it's still very grim. The outlook for the next 6 months is very bleak.
Sure. And of course, when it comes to Jet, Tarun and Anirban will be bringing us the latest updates on how that saga will unfold. But meanwhile, Shukor, Tarun, Anirban, thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the discussion. The challenges for Jet 2.0's new owners are many. Whether it's getting all the requisite permits and getting back key slots, or pouring in money into this cash-guzzling business, or keeping incumbents at bay who will be none too happy with the return of a new old rival. Not to forget, all of this will be playing out against the aviation sector's biggest crisis because of COVID. To borrow a phrase from Shukor, Jet's new owners have got their work cut out. The coming months will reveal if they are indeed up to the task of getting Jet back up in the skies again. You've been listening to the Morning Brief from the Economic Times, and I'm Indulekha Aravind. Today's episode was edited and coordinated by Bhavya Dilip Kumar. Please write in with your feedback to the Morning Brief at timesgroup.com. The Morning Brief airs every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Thank you for listening. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you for choosing to fly with us.
All the clips in this episode belong to their respective owners. The credits can be found in the description.